Matt Bingham and others have commented about the recruiting class and the speculation that it could suffer based on the results on the field. Of course, DJ Hicks was lost. We can go to all sorts of conclusions considering who Oklahoma lost him to. And by the way, yes, Matt, if you didn't catch my response, this is not a Cleveland Guardians shirt. It was purchased under the Cleveland Indians banner. So this is older than that. It is a Cleveland Indian shirt. So anyway, this is just something we can speculate about all day. We're going to have to see a class that's roughly top 5 in the country and how it's going to play out, how Brent Venables and his staff is going to close. But we are less than 2 months away from National Signing Day. So it's going to get here pretty quick right after the regular season ends, and see if they're able to retain all these high-level commits.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest concern right now is Colton Vasek on the defensive side of the ball. He's taken a couple of visits to Texas, and I think some of these. And there was another guy. This is on the offensive side of the ball, has taken a couple of visits to Miami. So I think, Mark, I think some of these kids are starting to, and this is not anything bad about Venables and what he said, and his Oklahoma's thought process about once you're committed. But I think not taking any visits. But I think some of these kids are kind of right now calling Oklahoma's bluff, so to speak, because I think a lot of them know their kids are smart. They see the landscape here. They know how Oklahoma's playing on the defense, and I think probably the thought process is Oklahoma needs them much more than they need Oklahoma. So I think Venables may, I don't know if he will publicly, but may eventually, kind of back off of that comment a little bit because of where Oklahoma's headed to this year versus what the expectations were, and must be in a position to get this big time talent. So I think he's the guy. Colton Vasek is the guy that I would probably be most concerned with as an Oklahoma fan, that could potentially flip. Now he's saying all the right things. I think he's publicly saying the things that you like to hear. He's still an Oklahoma Sooner. He's not decommitted. He's not. He has no plans to decommit. But the fact that you take other visits, there's a lot of different ways to look at that, right? He's an Austin kid, so it's just down the road if he's taking visits to Texas. So, and it may just be that he wants to be, he wants the opportunity with just to go and see different things and do different things like that. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. As you know, Mark, it's more and more recruiting is a money thing. Unfortunately, it's the world that we live in from a recruiting, from a high quality talent perspective, and so we'll see how that continues to go, just in terms of bidding wars that happen under the table, so to speak. And so, but I believe Cade McFarland's a guy that's been on Oklahoma's radar, big nose tackle kid that has been very, very positive about Oklahoma. So he's a kid that Oklahoma's really kind of continuing to be in on, and so they've got some backup situations there for Hicks. So we'll see. But as I've mentioned a couple of times, it's very interesting to see what the thought process for these kids are. Do you salivate at the opportunity that the team that you've committed to is struggling defensively at your position group, and that you have a really, really good chance to play as a true freshman? Or the scenario B, does that does it have the opposite factor? Like, okay, this team they're not playing as well as I thought they would be. This is not a national championship caliber team. Now I'm maybe looking to go somewhere else that has a better opportunity and is better positioned to win a championship. So, I think there's a fair amount of kids probably in both boats, but will be interesting to see if the guys specifically where Oklahoma's at, that they're in probably more desperation mode than even maybe some of these other teams that we're recruiting against. When you think of a DJ Hicks, like recruiting against Texas A&M, Texas A&M has loads and loads of talent on the defensive line, but again, the same thing. When you look at it, how are they developing that talent? I think over the last couple of years, Texas A&M has had just outstanding recruiting classes, but it's not translating to the level of success on the field that you would expect, right? So, yeah, that'll be interesting, as you mentioned, as we close in here and a couple of months away from the early signing period.
I know Texas A&M is closing strong on this 2023 class, but it's still only 18th. So despite all the, I'll call it partial perception and partial, it's reality of how they're approaching recruiting and what they're doing and what others are doing. They're not the only one. They just seem to be the target as the prime example and maybe the most lucrative and the most visible because of some things that have happened. But it seems to me like the same players are at the top of the board. So, when all this came down the pike and we started to speculate on who would benefit from NIL and who would suffer, my simplistic thought was that the same boosters and supporters of all the schools that have built the best facilities, that have hired the best staffs to go recruit, have made the plane flights and all the transportation available at a moment's notice, and all the things that go into the recruiting budgets and the facilities are going to be the same people that are going to pony up the collectives to pay the players. So I wouldn't think that the landscape would change much, but there would have to be maybe an outlier here or there that in the old world excelled, but may not have the resources to keep up. And then on the flip side, maybe a school or two or three that are able to elevate because they are able to put something together from an NIL standpoint that is going to raise their game. But generally, the haves are going to continue to be the haves and the have-nots, the have-nots. Hey, Jason, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. My dog was going a little bit crazy. I was trying to drown out the noise. But no, you're absolutely right. It's going to be. For the foreseeable future, it's going to be the same people over and over. It's when you look at the top five, it's Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and then even towards the end, you've got Texas, LSU, Clemson, Florida, Tennessee. Yeah, it's going to be the same. It's the same teams over and over again. And even, you have to assume even Texas A&M being at your point at 18, they get up into at least the top 10. Right. So I think, yeah, it's just a different world. I think it's a world that that recruiting has been living in over the last few years, but I think NIL has made it more maybe public, I think, than probably it has been in the past. And it's unfortunate in a lot of ways for some of the little the not the little, but the non-blue blood teams that don't necessarily have the same resources to be able to do that. But for Oklahoma's perspective, even though there's a negative trajectory to this team, they're still number 4 overall in the 23 composite with a couple of kids still remaining. They've got 22 commits right now in that cycle. They're still waiting on a few more, some potential flips or some guys that are late. Kind of late decision makers. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what the impact of this season makes with how that impacts the recruiting cycle in a lot of different ways. You know, in some of these teams, like Texas A&M isn't in, like I said, isn't in a great position right now. Wins and losses, right? I mean, they obviously probably should have beat Alabama a couple weeks ago, but they didn't. And you know, now they seem to be on track for a 4 or 5 loss season this year. And so, you know, Miami's up there in the top 10, but they're not having anywhere near as good of a season as a lot of people thought that they would. You know, coming into Notre Dame is in the same way. I know LSU kind of they got a big win as well, but you know, they are not quite at the same level that they have been. So, you know, it's interesting. Some of these kids, you know, maybe it doesn't necessarily really matter as much. They're more interested in going to the school that has traditionally been good, where versus where they're maybe currently at this particular season.
And just to put it in perspective, even though Texas A&M currently is the 18th place recruiting class right now in the 2023 rankings, their average player rating is number 4. So they just need to bring in more commits, and I don't think that's an issue. So they've got 12 commits. The teams above them are in the 15 to 20, even more than 20 range. So it's a numbers game at this point, and Texas A&M will skyrocket, I would think, or jump considerably in those rankings. The way I would evaluate a college decision as a football player at my age versus what I would have done when I was 15 years old. At 15 years old, 20 years old, whatever, I would have told you, well, I just want to play for I'm going to go play for my favorite team, number one, but also I want to go play for a national championship. Yeah. I just want to win national championships, play for the very best team possible. You know, but then it becomes a career decision. And I would be seriously looking at coaching staffs and position coaches to see if I believed that they were the right position coaches to develop my ability and teach me to be the best NFL prospect possible. Would be a major factor in my decision.